Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about furnace filters. For this episode, we're going to cover just the basic furnace filters, so your fiberglass filters, washable, pleated, and electrostatic. And these will range anywhere from $1 to $20.
Wow.
And they have really expensive ones. You can get real specialized replaceable furnace filters for up to $100. Some real crazy ones. But the basic ones that you'd go to a hardware store or a big box store, they're going to range probably in that $7 to $20. Unless you're just getting a cheapy fiberglass.
So let's start off by explaining what do furnace filters do.
Okay, so in your furnace, whether you have just a furnace for heat or whether you have central air, where you have cooling coils on the top part of your furnace, the furnace filter is going to protect the fan, the blowers. It's going to, keep all this dust and debris from getting into it. When I was investing in real estate and some of these old furnaces, it was amazing. We'd go in some of these houses and they either had completely clogged filters or they had no filter at all. And when we would open up the blower area, it was amazing how much dirt and debris was inside the motor itself, and the bearings and everything were just caked. It was absolutely amazing to see some of these furnaces where the homeowner never used a filter. And it absolutely will shorten the life of your blower motor. And then when you get into these higher efficiency furnaces,
right,
you can actually do a lot of damage to them. So it's very important to protect the furnace first off with a basic filter, and then as we get into some of these better quality filters, the philosophy is we're cleaning the air.
Why don't we start with fiberglass filters?
Okay, they're great because they're very inexpensive. You can probably get them on sale for about $1. $1 to $3 is probably the average. What it does is it will prevent any large particles from getting into the fan, the blower, and building up all these particles in the furnace. It helps keep your ductwork clean. It's funny, some of these houses that we invested in, it was crazy. We found Snicker bar wrappers and all kinds of stuff in the blower motor. And those were the old furnaces, just a standing pilot and big burners, cast iron heat exchangers. They were really cool. They were workhorses, but they were very powerful too. So anything laying near the vents with the cold air return, it would just suck it in, and work its way down to the furnace itself. And that's why just a cheapy furnace filter at least protects you from getting this stuff into the blower and building up on all the bearings and everything in the fan. So, if you just want to protect your furnace, get this. It's going to allow the most movement of air. And especially on some of these new high efficiency furnaces, they don't have very powerful fans. So you're going to get the best airflow. And if you have no allergies, if you're not doing a lot of construction around the house and you're not worried about the quality of the air, I think they just do a very nice job.
So you should probably describe what a fiberglass filter looks like.
So they're just a cheap, thin webbing. You can see through them. It's a fiberglass spun filter.
Right. It's got like the cardboard frame.
Right. You can buy those where you can cut them to size, so you can get those fairly cheap too. But you can see right through them. And one way you can kind of supercharge them, at the hardware store, you can get a product called Filter Charger.
And what does that do?
It's a spray. It's like a tacky spray. So you shake this up, you spray your cheapy fiberglass filters, and it makes them sticky. So now they're grabbing a lot more out of the air. So you still have great airflow that's moving through this web of spun fiberglass, but you're actually grabbing a lot more particles out of the air.
Do you have to change it? So if you use this filter charger, do you have to change it more often?
I would say it's going to do a better job depending on what you're doing in your house. If you have pets, if you're doing, if you're working around the house and you're sanding, if you're doing any construction, absolutely. And I think the key to all of these, no matter what type of filter you're using, you should be checking it at least once a month.
Right. Because
you're going to see the status of the filter.
So did we say that the fiberglass filters last about a month?
No.
But
we did now. So, and what's cool about that filter charger, that can, which runs about $6, it'll do 100 charge up 100 fiberglass filters.
So basically, when they go on sale, these fiberglass filters, you should just buy a box of 12.
Yeah, great.
What about washable filters?
So washable are interesting. They're a little thicker, so there's a little more surface area, and these will run you $7 to $20 depending on the manufacturer. And this you actually wash, so you look at it every 30 days, you pull it out, you look at it, and you wash. And it would probably be smart, if you have a washable one, just pull it out every 30 days and wash it. They're going to last 12 to 24 washings. So for around $10, you're going to have something that you can use all year, basically. It has a little more surface area, so it's pulling a little bit more out of the air, and it's something that now you've gone to the store one time and you've got something that you can use over and over.
So how do you wash it?
So just rinse it probably in the shower, probably the easiest thing. You can use a hose outside, and it slowly gets clogged, and you can see it slowly gets brown. We tried a couple in a couple of the buildings that we invested in, just because we didn't want to constantly buy things. When we started, we just were looking for the cheapest alternative we could find. But they really do start to they turn gray, and then they really get dark. So they'll slowly stop being efficient, but probably by the end of the year. But if you hose it down, we would always do it in the shower because most of our tenants didn't have a hose outside. But they do a fine job.
How long does it take to dry?
And that's a great point, because you want to make sure it's fully dry. So I would leave it outside, especially good in the summer, because you can shake them off really well. Leave it outside till it feels dry, because potentially you can grow some mold on this, and then you definitely do not want mold in your ductwork. So that's a great thought, is if you use and that is kind of the downside of a washable. It has to be dry before you put it in.
So what about pleated filters?
So the last two styles that are the basic replaceable ones are pleated and then electrostatic. These have much more surface area, so they take a finer material. You can't see through this like you can with fiberglass, and they've woven this, they've pleated it so that there's much more surface area, so it allows more airflow with a thicker medium, and so you're grabbing much finer particles. Again, now we're going to start talking about MERV value, some of these FPR values. And when you get into these pleated filters, you also get into the electrostatic. And the pleated's going to run you from $7 to $20 on average. Again, they have much higher rated ones, but these are the basics. And then electrostatic, what they're using with the electrostatic is they're using these materials that actually, as air moves through it, it creates this static charge, and it's pulling particles out of the air. So real cool science behind it. But the pleated and electrostatic are kind of both in the same category. And the electrostatic is probably going to run you $10 to $20.
So what are the ratings that you talked about?
So there's a couple different scales. If you're looking at any of the 3M filters, 3M, because they're one of the biggest, they have their own system, and it's called FPR. So that's for Filter Performance Rating. And they have a scale from 1 to 10. 10 is your best, pulling out the smallest particles from the air. So they're pulling out smoke and viruses. I mean, just crazy how dense this filter medium is. And then a 1 having a ton of airflow, and it doesn't pull as small particles out of the air. And then most other manufacturers, they use the MERV. It's MERV. And it used to be a scale from 1 to 12.
Well, what does that stand for?
So MERV is Minimum Efficiency Reporting Value. So again, 1 through 12 used to always be what it was when we first started selling filters. And then it went to a scale from 1 to 16. And now it's 1 to 20. So it's funny how that's changed. And, then you have HEPA filters. So these are high efficiency particulate air filters. This is what you find in a lot of the vacuums. Again, if you're looking to clean the air, this is something that's going to pull the smallest particles, allergens, out of the air and actually make the air cleaner. Again, there's a lot of different philosophies and a lot of different schools of thought, but those are the scales. The higher the number, the cleaner the air is, the more particles that it's going to pull out of the air.
So on the packaging for these pleated furnace filters, it says it lasts up to 3 months.
Right.
Do they?
Well, that's the problem. I think a lot of homeowners see it. They say, oh, great, I don't have to look at it for 3 months. And depending on the furnace filter you have, if it has a very high rating, so it's pulling very fine particles out of the air, And let's say you have pets, you have smokers in the house. If you're just kicking up a lot of particles in your home, you can clog this very quickly. And then what happens on some of these new high efficiency furnaces, you can damage the fan, you can not get as good an air circulation, and there's definitely some concerns with safety. What's interesting, how a furnace works, you've got this heat exchanger. So your burners are heating up a little chamber that gets super hot. Your air is actually flowing around this chamber and it's picking up this heat, and it helps actually cool this heat exchanger. Now all those burning gases go out a flue and outside your house, and so the air that's blowing never comes in contact with those burning gases. So if you can, and it's not exactly just a chamber, it's a series of small chambers, but in general, basically just to give you the concept, there's a chamber that heats up, air flows around this, and that's how you get your heat. The problem is if you slow down the flow of air, so let's say your filter is clogged,
right,
and you're not getting good airflow, now this heat exchanger is overheating. These new furnaces have very thin metal, and you can actually crack your heat exchanger just because you have bad airflow. So you have a furnace filter that's clogged, you can crack your heat exchanger, and now what happens is you've destroyed your furnace, and you potentially have a deadly situation. So now you're leaking carbon monoxide into the home. That's basically what the heat exchanger is designed to do, is to protect you from those burning gases. And now just from a bad, dirty furnace filter, you can have a damaged furnace and deadly consequences. So just very interesting how important it is to constantly be checking the furnace filters, and especially if you're buying these really expensive, high-quality ones, because they can get clogged very quickly.
So basically, no matter what style furnace filter you're using, you should check it once a month.
Absolutely. And then, depending on the manufacturer, you really should check your manual, and if you don't have it, go online. Many of these high-rated furnaces don't recommend a furnace filter over a MERV 13 because the fan itself doesn't have enough capacity to move the air properly. And again, we're very concerned about the heat exchanger doing its job properly. And then in the summer, it's very important that we have the proper airflow over the cooling coils. If you have central air, you've got these cooling coils inside, right above the heat exchanger in the furnace, which homeowners will never see.
Right.
But if they get clogged, now you can't, now you're not, your cooling system isn't doing its job properly. If you're not keeping your furnace filter clean and changing it regularly, then you have dust and debris that builds up on these cooling coils. What can happen is it's not properly cooling, and you can actually get a reduction of airflow. The coils can freeze, and now you don't have air, and you can actually damage the coils. And now we're talking a very expensive repair project.
Well, I see that all the time, with our sales with furnace filters, is we should be selling steady all year round. But as soon as it first, time it gets cold out, that's when we see a huge spike in our sales for furnace filters. But really, you're using it all year if you have central air.
If you have central air, you should be changing it once a month if you're using your air conditioner. So it really shouldn't be a furnace filter.
Right, it's an air filter.
Right. Furnace and air conditioning filter.
Yeah. So what about heating and air conditioning guys saying for high efficiency furnaces, you need to use the fiberglass filters? We get customers that come in and say that all the time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the manufacturers recommend them just because it's keeping all the parts clean. Some of these new furnaces have a couple of different fans and delicate parts, so and the heat exchangers aren't that thick metal that they used to be years ago. So they are more sensitive, more delicate to the movement of air. So I would definitely, again, look at your manufacturer, see what they recommend, and go with that. Because sometimes you can actually damage your furnace if you have too good of a filter in there. You're not getting the proper airflow.
So my parents, just over this past week, they called. So the furnace was running all night. It wouldn't shut off, and it was blowing cool air. They called in the heating and air conditioning guy. He came in. He changed their furnace filter for them and changed the thermostat and charged them $150.
Wow, yeah.
So, but it's not really solving the problem when you're talking about why there was blowing cool air, right?
Usually it's the flame sensor on these newer furnaces that needs to be cleaned once a season. What's interesting is these new computers in some furnaces, if the furnace filter is clogged, so this is a safety, again, to protect the heat exchanger from cracking and allowing carbon monoxide to come into the house. If the furnace filter isn't allowing enough airflow, it'll actually shut down, and then it'll start up again, and if there's not proper airflow and it overheats, then it shuts down a second time. In many of these new furnaces, if it shuts down 4 times in succession, it'll shut off and you cannot restart it. You have to have a technician come in with a special piece of equipment that it resets the computer. So again, very important that we're changing these furnace filters and having the right furnace filter in the furnace.
Do you have any tips on changing your furnace filter?
So I would always turn off the electric first. There's going to be an electrical switch on the side of the furnace. You're going to need to find where the furnace filter is. Most of them are going to have a slot just before the furnace on the cold air return side, or they're going to have it inside the furnace, so you're going to have to take off the front panel.
That's how my dad's is, right?
Yes, underneath on the bottom of the furnace. Once you remove that, you're going to pull out the old one, and you're going to want to make sure the old one fits nice. There's no gaps, there's no air that's getting around it, because you have no idea, if you live in a house where someone else lived there, they might have been putting in the wrong size furnace. So look at the old one, make sure there's no gaps. You want that completely covering the cold air return. Pull that out. You want to check the size. It's something you might want to mark on the side of your furnace. And then when you're putting in the new one, make sure that you look at the arrow. You want the arrow pointing toward the furnace or pointing toward where the warm air is going to go. So if you have the cold air return coming from one side, you want the arrow pointing in towards the furnace.
So you can't put them in backwards?
Yes, you can put them in backwards. Some manufacturers strategically set up this webbing of material so that it collects the most amount of particles in the air. So you definitely want the arrow facing the way that the air is going to be blowing.
I never knew that. I always wondered why there was arrows on it.
And then I would always get into a routine of having a date. So the first of every month, or mark it, on the calendar, just so you have a routine that you get in the habit of, because again, shocking how important just this filter is for your super expensive furnace. And then make sure when you put it in, it's secure. Some furnaces have a spring or a piece of metal that holds it into place, but you don't want it wobbling. You want it secure in the cold air duct so that air isn't coming around it. You want it to totally filter the air. Lock it in place, put the cover on if you have to, and then make sure you turn your furnace back on. So I have an interesting stat I saw online, a poll that was done with a bunch of these heating companies. 48% of homeowners change their furnace filter once a month. 24% change it twice a year. 22% change it once a year. And then 6% said, there's a filter?
That's not good. So we just took some training about carpet care and how carpet acts like a big air filter throughout your whole house.
Yeah, amazing.
So if you take out your carpets and you put in hardwood floors or laminate floors, do you have to change your furnace filters more often?
Yes, I would definitely check it more often, because what happens, carpets, they're pulling out dust, dander, smoke, all these things in the air really drop pretty quickly. It's funny, if you vacuum, if you use a really good vacuum once a month and vacuum, you can see how much you pull out of your carpet compared to if you remove your furnace filter. Your furnace filter is just grabbing those smallest particles that are flying through the air. So if you have removed your wall-to-wall carpeting, it's important that you're definitely staying on top of changing your furnace filters.
What are the highest rated companies for furnace filters?
So 3M is always rated very good. Their Filtrete furnace filters do a nice job. And then Rheem and Honeywell were also rated very high. I would say that the one thing you want to check is, your manufacturer on your furnace to see what they recommend as far as like the MERV value or the FPR value. And in general, from the research I did, if you see something with a MERV of 5 to 13, that seems to be about the range for most manufacturers.
And this is basically a pleated filter.
A pleated filter. So if you don't have allergies, if you don't have a dirty house or pets, I would say that a fiberglass filter will probably do a fine job. You can use that filter charger spray on it, and you're going to protect your furnace. If you're looking to have a cleaner environment, less dust, and if you have any allergies, then you're looking for a pleated filter around 5 to 13 seems to be the average, and it'll do a very nice job for you.
What factors in your home would make you purchase these higher-end furnace filters?
So I'd say if you wear shoes in your house, if you don't have wall-to-wall carpeting, if you have a bunch of pets, if you're a smoker, believe it or not, if you use a fireplace and you're burning a lot of natural wood, it creates a lot of stuff in the air. If you burn a lot of candles or do a lot of cooking, actually is a factor for wanting to use a better quality furnace filter.
So it's actually cleaning the air?
Exactly. And then if you don't vacuum ever, you want a better filter.
Do you have anything else to add?
That's it.
So I guess that wraps up this episode.
If you'd like to subscribe, you can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher.
And if you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
You could subscribe to that as well.
If you'd like to email us, you can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.